Ladies and gentlemen, it's a Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and my guest is wonderful Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
I'm so glad you're here. And as
Yeah,
you,
I had to recover from that 4th of July celebration.
yeah, it's great.
Almost didn't make it.
Canada Day was just a few days ago on July 1st. And we obviously also had celebration and spent wonderful weekend with our daughter and grandchildren, and it was great time. Jonathan, I wanted to talk about something because I was listening to several sources, and also some of them are quite credible. I'm trying to listen to credible sources. I'm not always successful at that. However, the first thing what I started to think, I read a lot of history books about great people in history. Like some believe they're all murderers, but nevertheless, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Stalin, and in a different occasion.
You wouldn't want to have all those guys at your party.
No. Yeah, okay, but there is a larger line of great leaders such as Churchill, such as Ronald Reagan. I would put on the same line, and several others. Now, I was thinking about how one person can change the result of history and greatly affect it or even change it completely. Because if you think about this Russian Ukrainian war, the brutal invasion of Russians, there is only one man is behind it, and only one man who adamantly wanted is Vladimir Putin. There is no one. I can't figure out the second person in this world who also wanted that war. Probably there are a few, but from people that I know of and who are well known, I can't figure out second person. So is that confirms a theory of great evil can change um, the sort of historical line of
Well,
history.
there is an argument to be made for that. As C.S. Lewis pointed out when we talked to when the question of why does evil exist? Well, C.S. Lewis pointed out that about the role that free will plays. That if a person is free to be good, that person is also free to be evil. Free will is what makes evil possible. So, given that given we are all created with free will, we all have the power to choose whether to do good or whether to do evil. And I would argue that the all of the misery, death, tragedy, calamities, and other things that make up what we call recorded human history have all been the accumulated consequences of people choosing to do evil rather than good.
Mhm. Because see, when you think about what's happened to Ukraine, had double whammy. It has misfortune to has a neighbor such as Russia, and second one, part of double whammy is that it's Russia in turn is being ruled by a ruthless dictator, Putin, who actually created misery for actually both Russian and Ukrainian people, because well over 500,000 people perished as a result of this. And what are the achievements? Okay, so you sacrificed 500,000 people so far, and very soon it will start to approach million. By the way, it's not
Oh yeah,
static.
I have no doubt.
And what are
And
the achievements for even Russia? For Ukrainians, there are no achievements, and the country is being destroyed systematically by Russians. But even Russia, it also doesn't have its advantages, neither political or economical or military or any at all.
and it's this is one of those conflicts where the where to fight the war is bad, but to surrender is worse. And so it's one of those things where you really don't have a choice, where the conflict has been thrust upon you. And The what's going to be interesting is I've been maintaining, the Ukraine holds its destiny in its own hands. Yeah, when you've seen the proposed peace plans, Putin's plan ceasefire proposal amounts to nothing more than surrender or die. His conditions for a ceasefire amount to preemptive surrender. That's unacceptable, and because the Ukrainians are not about to commit national suicide, and yet the only way and what historical examples have shown us, and what people like Churchill have told us, is that the Russians respect only strength, and they respect strength, and there's nothing for which they have more contempt than weakness, particularly military weakness, and we have been seeing that throughout this Russian-Ukrainian war. So therefore, now it becomes imperative. It's very clear to the Ukrainians, and increasingly clear to a number of our Western European allies, that the only way this is really going to end is with the military defeat of Russia. They must be compelled to recognize this. All right, let's declare victory and go home, even if they have to lie to themselves. The Russians have been really good at lying to everybody else. They might as well be lying to themselves. Okay, we won. Let's go home. And just go and try to bide their time for the next potential opportunity. And it's interesting that Putin, in a recent speech, was saying that they could not have a ceasefire because then that would give the other side time to build up. Well, he's really mirror imaging what he would do. Yeah, it's a perfect projection of his own intentions. And so, realistically, the Russians must be compelled through a decisive operational defeat on the battlefield. And I have been contending all along that the center of gravity of this entire conflict is the Crimean Peninsula. And if the Ukrainians can succeed in cutting off both logistical and reinforcement links to the Crimean Peninsula, and then be able to launch a decisive counteroffensive, which forces the occupying Russian forces in Crimea to surrender, then this creates an unmistakable, visible political and military defeat for the Russians. And then they have no choice left but basically to pull out. The Ukrainians will be able to concentrate their reserves and their freed up forces against the occupying Russians in the east. And it will become increasingly clear as the Ukrainians gain qualitatively superior weapons and aircraft to be able to achieve air superiority over eastern Ukraine. This will become evident as well as the full effect of the aircraft reinforcements are demonstrated. So right now it's a waiting game, but I would say that the window of opportunity for Ukraine is they have to achieve this decisive operational victory before the November elections. Now, as we have seen, it is becoming, and I don't want to comment extensively on this, but it is becoming increasingly clear that based on the polling trends and based on the behavior of the political parties, is that the Democrats, a number of political analysts are saying that the Democrats are heading for a decisive defeat in November. And former President Trump, for his part, is doing a very wise political thing. He is refraining. He is showing discipline. He is refraining from commenting on it. In that he's in effect following Napoleon's axiom: never interfere with an enemy who is in the process of destroying himself.
Absolutely.
So former President Trump is doing what Napoleon would do in a political context. He is allowing the Democrats essentially to destroy themselves, and by simply showing restraint, he is actually benefiting from it. And it also, by the way, allows him to conserve funds. He does not have to expend quite so much in the way of funds, going on attack ads or anything like that. They can even reschedule certain things and conserve resources that way and continue to build up political funds, which again is a very wise move.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now and we will see this play out in the coming weeks. As first we'll have the Republican convention, which former President Trump will maximize harmony, positive messaging, and yes, he will do the usual requisite attacks on the record of the current administration, but he will more than likely strike a very positive note and do it and try to imitate in a certain sense, try to imitate former President Reagan in delivering a positive message and offering a positive alternative. Now, given the fact that his plan for Russia peace with Ukraine, and okay, oh my goodness, why would any of that happen? I see this question that's just come up. Why on earth would any of that happen when the Russians are in control of most of eastern Ukraine and just need to wait until the likely Trump administration takes control? Well, the reason, no, a very good question. The thing is that it is not a guarantee. The reason that President Trump has been proposing this idea of not giving any aid to NATO. It's actually encouraging the NATO membership to give more support to Ukraine. It said, hey, we can't count on unlimited support from the U.S. We have to if we're going to stop Russia, we have to stop them now. And we have to defeat them decisively. The way you do that is you give Ukraine as much support as you can and allow the Ukrainians to choose the moment to mount their counteroffensive. And because the Ukrainians realize that they have a relatively narrow window in order to achieve this. Once the election takes place, it is not a guarantee. It is not a guarantee that President Trump is going to throw his support to Russia. He's certainly not going to desert NATO, but he is going to encourage the other NATO members to step up and do their fair share. So I would say that the moment is still arriving when the Ukrainians will be able to inflict that decisive counteroffensive, retake the Crimea, and then be able to concentrate their resources against eastern Ukraine. So I would say that it's a wait and see moment, but I think we're still waiting for that decisive moment by the Ukrainians.
I would like to say something that Russians are very practical on the front lines right now. What means practical? They're losing 1,200 people a day. So if you want to call it practical, unless there is no alternative, but there is an alternative. It's stop fighting. Even if you stop fighting for, say, 5 days, you save 6,000 your own lives.
Right.
However, for Putin, it's not a big deal. What he is practical, and why did I say that, is that he understands that sooner or later it most likely will come to some kind of armistice and other things, and all will be frozen on the line. So he believes that even if he grabs extra 100 meters here and 150 meters over there and a little bit over here, so that will be his border where everything will be frozen, if it will be frozen. So that's why they call it, Ukrainians call it a meat attack. So he provides just a lot of meat. They're moving ahead until half of them are killed, the other half went back. But in 2 hours, it repeats the same thing. They put more people, so it's the same wave. It's coming in, half of them are being killed, half of them are run away. In 2 hours, yet another attack in the same exact place. So they know that they should try either a little bit on the left or on the right. No, they don't do that. They just completely, and this actually exhausts Ukrainian defenses, believe it or not. They have to spend ammunition to do this or so on. And that's what Russian strategy and tactics as well. It's horrible.
It's somewhat reminiscent of the Chinese human wave attacks during the Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
And the mistake that the Chinese made was that the fact that going up against the U.S. had superior logistical and firepower resources, so they could make mincemeat of these human wave attacks even more so, and particularly on the narrow Korean peninsula, where the Chinese could not. There was no way they could outflank U.S. forces, but they would. And eventually, the Chinese were convinced to seek a ceasefire uh, because the Eisenhower threatened to use nuclear weapons. And my goodness, here we have a very interesting comment by Mr. Blank. Has zero interest in supporting Ukraine. As McCarthy told you, he's been on Vlad's payroll for years. All troops and funds supporting Ukraine will be withdrawn. You must know that. Zelensky's only hope is for the Dems to win. I still don't rule that out, but under Trump, who loves to negotiate, he'll give Putin Eastern Ukraine if he agrees to make it, or to independent nation and leave Western Ukraine alone. Problem solved. I respectfully Trump will call the troops in the Ukraine home and shift them to the Mexican border. Okay, very interesting. Interesting theory. I respectfully disagree. That I don't think that situation is going to occur, and I don't think that President Trump in his second administration is going to start off by throwing Ukraine to the wolves. So, in any case, that is my stance on it. Sasha, what do you think?
First of all, I think that Trump's victory is not a done deal yet. And I'll tell you what I think may happen is that the Democrats will replace Biden, and that's what they should have done the next day after debates. And the thing is not that Biden is 3 years older than Trump. There are some people who are doing fantastically well into their 90s. They are physically performing well, they can talk and make speeches and so on. And yet there are people in their 50s and 60s who are really like vegetables. They can't save in the water. So
people age at different rates.
Absolutely.
You can't apply a simple formula to everyone and say that they're going to be either toast or they're going to be vigorous by a certain age.
Absolutely.
Everyone has their different rates, and even dementia when it occurs in some people, it occurs at different rates also.
Yes, and progressing at different rates too.
Yeah, and in some cases it starts off slowly and then it accelerates.
Exactly, it goes like this. And what's happened is that look, there is something else what's important. It's not that Trump, okay, he's the fact that he's younger 3 years and he looks probably 20 years younger than Biden, and he has all his facilities. Okay, you can criticize him and his policies as much as you want, but he looks, in my opinion, 20 years younger than Biden, and he acts 20 years younger than Biden.
Yeah.
Now, there is something else. The desire to hold on to presidency. In Trump's case, it's 150%. That's what led to January 6th. And so his desire for power is absolutely incredible. Maybe in history, a handful of people have such a desire for power as Trump. Now, in Biden's case, it's not so obvious. 4 years ago, okay, he was 4 years younger, he looked younger, he acted younger. And all his premises was, at least that's what he was talking about, that he sees a threat from second Trump's presidency, and therefore he decided to offer himself and so on. So he was playing a card. He's trying to save American people from second Trump's term. I mean, even that is kind of a strange idea to offer himself to save American people from.
That starts sounding like Vladimir Putin's assertion that God sent him to prevent World War III.
Yeah.
You start hearing some of Vladimir's arguments, and you get to it. My goodness, how delusional can we get?
It reminds me of the old joke from late Jackie Mason when he was saying that every day he starts with praying for Bush senior health when he was president at the time. So he was asked, so why are you doing? I think he has great health. Well, you know what? He's protecting us from Dan Quayle. That's why I want him to be in good health. So,
Okay.
so
So is Biden staying in because he's protecting us from Kamala
he's
Harris? Yeah.
protected. Okay, I think that listen, Kamala Harris, for all her inconsistencies, maybe, or for lack of a better
I
word,
I will not comment on that.
no,
I simply refuse to. That I just
but
you just sit there and I'd like to I would the phrase that I use the practice that I use is uh, it is better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak up and remove all doubt.
yeah, yeah, okay, very well said. No, I think at this point, the debates just show it's not that he didn't perform well, which was important because what 50 million people saw the debates around the world and so on.
They weren't edited.
There is no guarantee that, say, a month from now, he will do better than what he did during the debates. He may do even worse because the deterioration is on its way. So just how fast he will deteriorate. Maybe in a month from now, he won't even be able to walk on stage. Maybe he will. So at this point, in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, anybody starting with Kamala Harris and Newsom and all these the rest of these wonderful people, I think anyone is a better choice than Joe Biden because at least unlike him, somebody can show up. Come with anybody's help on stage, take microphone, say something maybe not 100% a great wisdom speech, but at least something coherent, something that is possible to put together and understand. So, okay, so probably Trump will win in this case, but there is no fight between Trump and today's Biden. That's really impossible to watch. It's so demeaning. It's they have to just help all the Joe. Okay, he was a good man. He was a vice president. He was a president. He was a good father. He's a good husband. He's a absolutely wonderful man. But his time has passed.
But here's something which someone else has mentioned. If Joe Biden steps, if President Biden steps down, that and saying that he can no longer run, then the question is begged. It begs the question: well, if you're too unfit to run, why are you still staying as president? Why don't you simply go the next step and simply step down? Again, that raises the question. Then that means Vice President Kamala Harris becomes president, and that's kind of it's a nasty situation, no matter how you look at it.
But she has 4 months to be a president if he will resign. 4 months is not such a big deal. And Kamala Harris, how much evil she can do in 4 months? What do you think?
It's not how much evil she can do; it's how much evil our adversaries can do if they recognize what kind of presidency they have in place. They might see that as a window of vulnerability. Although what they could do within that 4 months is an open question.
Well, they can do the same thing in 4 months while Joe Biden will remain a president because he showed blatantly his weaknesses, and anybody can use it. Okay, Kamala Harris. Okay, actually, I'll tell you one thing. With all due respect, I remember one. It was, I think, a Senate hearing, and she was up against Jordan and few other not noticeable Republicans, and she was so powerful. She made really Jordan and his people. They look like school children that a teacher took good care of them, and she was really fantastic in that performance. But this is she used her skills as a former prosecutor, and that was her kind of cup of tea. And now, what else she is capable of, I'm not so sure because I didn't follow her appearances. And I think what she was smart enough always to be in the shade of Joe Biden. She never was trying to upstage herself. So she was always there. If you need me, I'm here, and so on. So she was appearing just as often as Biden wanted her to appear. Now, situation can change and very quickly. But we'll see. It's a quite interesting political situation right now. I don't remember that U.S. Had such a dilemma.
No, no, not in the only situation, historical situation that even comes reasonably close is the one with Wilson in World War One when
Yeah,
he's
yeah, exactly.
and he was essentially and his wife was essentially his chief spokesperson, and some say that she was really the acting president.
Yeah, but Jonathan, it was well before internet and social
Correct.
media.
And
So,
you could
yes.
shield that kind of news from coming out to the general public. So, but now, as you're right, it is impossible for a president to shield any kind of infirmity for very long from the general public. So,
Well, Roosevelt was.
oh, Roosevelt was he was very good at, and his staff were very good at. Most people did not know that Roosevelt was in a wheelchair, that crippling, and but he was very good at it. He was able, and he was remarkably able with his fireside chats to project strength and reassurance. He was exceptionally good at that, and and which is why he got elected to 4 terms.
Yeah, exactly. So if Biden wants to do anything and he wants really to stay, which to me is unthinkable, but still, he has to go into at least weekly public appearances on the, like a fireside chat or something else. He must appear from the people, and either he's unable to do that, so he has to immediately resign his presidency at once, or if he is able and he may even improve, I don't know how, but still a possibility. I mean,
You would have to come up with some incredible cocktail of drugs that have not been tried yet in order to make that happen.
so he's one who will try whatever never been
Yeah,
tried before.
exactly. They may well do that. I don't know how desperate they are.
So he may say that I offering myself to improve the sciences and medicine, and here is what I'm willing to do, and take 55 different drugs and take them right in front of his
Hmm.
appearances.
No,
That's something what people appreciate.
yeah, really. But
Ah,
in any case, and by the way, I thank our surprise commenter, Mr. Herbert Blank, for his sage questions and comments. Uh,
yes.
that is very welcome. I don't resent that at all. They are challenging questions and valid points, and I would respectfully contend that the and my contention is, and I am one of the very few who contend this, by the way,
Mm.
that Ukraine still has an open window. Oh, hey, let's check this out. Biden's biggest problem is he has not galvanized the base. Correct. The Muslims are quite reluctant to vote for Biden, and the young people aren't even registering right now. They are alienated and don't see Biden as an answer and want to teach those old farts a lesson. Ooh, love it. Kamala brings fresh energy into the
Oh,
discussion. Fresh
yeah,
energy.
told you.
Yeah, the Dems need to keep at least 4 of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia. Trump needs to win them all. All of those states have majority Dem registration. If as many Dems percent-wise show, yeah, yeah, I appreciate that, Jonathan. I appreciate your very well-informed worldview. Well, thank you, Herbert. Thank you. Yeah, my worldview is basically shaped by my essentially 40 years of concentrated research uh, based upon my book, The Russian, what originally started out as my PhD dissertation on the Soviet view of U.S. strategic doctrine. I was just about the only person seriously researching how the Russians viewed our strategy. And the cumulated result of all of this reveals to me one very important thing, which I will pass along to you for your benefit, Herbert. The one thing, based upon my research, the one thing that the Russians fear more than anything else, even though they don't directly admit it, their actions and their responses to other U.S. initiatives in ballistic missile defense reveals that they fear the potential of American technology to neutralize the one thing that makes Russia a great power in its own estimation, their nuclear missile arsenal. So therefore, what I recommend in my book and what I recommend on this program is that the U.S. for the long, intermediate to long term ought to, instead of building more nuclear weapons, which does not really change the perception of our adversaries, that instead we should concentrate our efforts on ballistic missile defense, strategic defense, to create what I call a worldwide strategic defense matrix.
An
Wisdom.
asymmetrical response to.
And that is a classic asymmetric response. You don't copy what the adversaries are doing. You respond in a way which, like a chess player, which catches them off guard, unprepared.
Right.
One death that was little noticed earlier this year was that of Vladimir Posner. Oh yes, I remember Mr. Posner, a very learned and savvy man who was alarmed at what his Russia was becoming lately. Yes, and I remember Mr. Posner was, during the Cold War, actually taking a much more reasonable stance
Yeah.
than we would logically expect. And so therefore he became a relatively friendly voice for the Soviet Union.
It was a breach, remember, between
Yes.
Moscow and on the other side was American journalist. I forgot his name. But it was a very, very engaging show. It was running for some time. And but Posner at that time, he was a very different person that he became in his later years. Of course, he was much more democratic. Also, he was very few people in Soviet Union who had a very fluent English, because he was born in the United States, if you remember, and he spent
Mhm.
his young years in Europe, in Paris, and so finally his father, who was a KGB person, he went to Moscow, and of course his family went to Moscow. His mother was a French lady, that's why he fluent in French as well as English and Russian. And he was very interesting personality, but he should have done more with his life than he eventually done. But again, who am I to
But
judge?
to finish up my point with Mr. Blank, that essentially what I'm advocating is an asymmetrical response where we would form a worldwide strategic defense matrix, focusing on strategic defense, focus on neutralizing the nuclear arsenals of Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, so that we provide the basis for strategic stability. Thus, in the event of any ceasefire or armistice in the Russian-Ukrainian war, even if we don't accept Ukraine into NATO immediately, we could, through the creation of a world of wisdom, we could extend our ballistic missile defense shield over Ukraine and negate any future possibilities for Russia to resume its aggression. And therefore, and because that is, you notice that Russia quite frequently during this war has been doubling down in their verbal statements about trying to frighten the West with fears of nuclear escalation. And there are a number of reasons to doubt why Russia would be able to do what it is doing without suffering unacceptable damage in return. But the way, based upon my research, decades of research, the way to forestall this permanently is to stop any further building of nuclear weapons, divert all those resources into strategic defense, and focus on the negation and neutralization of the nuclear arsenals of Russia, China, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And that way you provide the greatest, and by the way, the centerpiece of that worldwide strategic defense matrix would be an upgraded U.S. Space Force. After all, President Trump proposed the Space Force in his first term. And so in his second term, he could upgrade that U.S. Space Force with a space fleet that would be capable of completing that worldwide strategic defense matrix. And he could well go down in history then as the man who negated the possibility of global nuclear war, which would not be a bad thing to go down in history for.
Yeah, very interesting development, and of course, we'll see what's the next day will bring us the news. Now, on Ukrainian news, there is something is being prepared. I have no doubts about it because I'm following many different sources, and they're discussing all kind of different peace proposals. And this one is not so good, and that one is not so good for different reasons. And if you combine this one and that one, and they're spending hours and a lot of energy to discuss all that. And this, I believe, is a camouflage for an attack that is I would say imminent. I think Ukrainians have no choice as to do the attack and trying to free Crimea. If that's not being done, then there is no purpose to continue fighting. They should agree to any peace, whatever it is, and just go on with their lives. If they cannot do it, so if they want to hide and they want to do it like a year ago, so they want to being on a practical side, okay, so we keep these weapons, we will keep whatever finances we've got from Western powers and US and so on. We are okay, then we will make our whatever peace with Russia and we will go on with our lives. Nothing will discredit Ukraine more than this pathetic plan, if you could call it a plan, because how they will get Western help to rebuild the Ukraine once the war is over if they will show such a horrendous attitude to the
Right.
West. So I don't think it's in plans, but with all this noise coming in my opinion, it's a camouflage for attack is being prepared, and especially there are some noises that F-16s are already in Ukraine, and some of them actually were flying over Crimea. So we'll see. I don't have any proof of that, but that's what I've heard from more than one source.
Yeah, I would say that your hunch or your supposition is similar to my hunch or supposition that the Ukrainians are waiting for the proper moment when they have what they are going to have. Ah, here we go, Mr. Blank again. Ah, yes. Oh boy, he's a big paragraph this time. The alternative may be giving Xi more of what he wants with respect to Taiwan and the emerging markets. Our empire will not last forever. It is correct. Yeah, I'll grant you that one. And it might be best to acknowledge Xi's efforts to cultivate support and development in emerging markets rather than continue to try and control and influence every government around the world. Just some thoughts to ponder. I don't think our nation is mature enough to take them seriously. We need a lot more pain than we've had in our memories aside. Herbert, believe it or not, I agree with you on an essential point here that the future role of the United States in the world for the remainder of the 21st century and beyond, we should not try to be a global empire. We should not try to be what used to be called the world policeman. But what we should do is what I advocate in the Russian view of U.S. strategy is the United States should strive to be the world's geopolitical balancer. In other words, we acted much as England acted as a political balancer vis-a-vis the continent of Europe during the 18th and 19th centuries, trying to prevent any one power from dominating the heartland or the world island, that the United States should act as the geopolitical balancer in conjunction with its NATO allies to prevent the dominance of the European heartland by any hostile power or combination thereof. That implies not so much containment. It is somewhat less aggressive than containment, but it is to strive to create a balance to discourage aggressors from undertaking overt aggression against our Western allies, just enough to create a balance of power theory. It's a modified balance of power theory, such as Morgenthau once advocated. And it's tricky. It requires skill in diplomacy as well as knowing how much military power to create in support of those objectives. You know, you don't want to have an overly aggressive geopolitical strategy because otherwise you fall into the trap of with your military spending, more of everything is better, which is no way to enforce fiscal discipline or economic growth, and you tend to get out of balance. So I would agree with you in that we should. What my recommendation in my book is that we strive to be the world's geopolitical balancer, and central to that would be the establishment of the worldwide strategic defense matrix, which takes nuclear weapons off the table. And the thing about if you want to have a good slogan for my worldwide strategic defense matrix, wisdom, the slogan would be "Wisdom does not kill."
Great. Great. I love it, Jonathan. Thank you so much for today's programs, and have a great weekend. And we'll see you on Tuesday, same place, same time.
And a good weekend to Mr. Blank for his cogent and yeah, they were wonderful comments. This is the first, I believe, this is the first time we've had an active participant that's been willing to supply some well thought out comments. Mr. Blank, I thank you for your comments.
Thank you so much.
Stimulate the discussion. I hope you return in future programs. You know,
And maybe we'll have more comments like this.
oh yes, that we could have ourselves a real intellectual free for all here.
Yeah, maybe a questions and answers program.
Who knows? This could be a good start. Thank you, Mr. Blank.
Thank you very much to all. Bye bye, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye bye.